Chris with Cycle Source Greasing Gears TV, and we are in the garage today to talk about the 2023 Indian Sport Chief. Before we get too far into this, I want to go through a list of specs just so we can tell you what this bike is. Here, this will be our first ride impressions. So we did get out and put this bike through its paces a little bit. Didn't ask the company for any information so far. You know, we just kind of wanted a raw, what does it feel like to ride, you know, find our way through things. Then we're going to go back in subsequent videos and actually ask them some information and give you guys some better in-depth facts on the bike. But for now, let's go over what features come with the 2023 Indian Sport Chief. The engine is a 54 millimeter bore closed loop fuel injection system. It's an air-cooled Thunderstroke 116-inch motor. Dual exhaust with a crossover. The motor makes 120 foot-pounds of torque, and that peak torque number comes in at 2,900 RPM. The transmission primary drive is a gear-driven wet clutch system. Holds 4 gallons of gasoline. The ground clearance is 6 inches. The lean angle comes in at 29.5. Overall length of the motorcycle is 90.6 inches. Comes in with a 28-degree rake. The seat height is just 27 inches off the ground, and the as-shipped running order weight of the motorcycle is 665 pounds. Now for stopping, the front brakes are dual Brembo with 320 millimeter semi-floating rotors and 4-piston calipers. The rear brake is a single 300 millimeter semi-floating rotor and 2-piston caliper. Front suspension is a 43 millimeter KYB inverted telescopic fork. Rear suspension are a dual set of Fox piggyback shocks. They add a little more travel in the back shocks. The bike sits up a little bit more. It's a little more fun to ride. Some other standard equipment you can expect are the ABS, the keyless ignition, USB charging port, and rear cylinder deactivation mode. Also comes with ride modes. Now, this is something we're going to start with. So everybody familiar with the ride modes from Harley-Davidson, up here in their Road Commander infotainment system, when you first turn the bike on, you get to see that you pick between touring mode, a standard mode, and a sport mode as far as your ride mode. Now, I'm not sure until we talk to Indian if part of that interacts with the braking or not, like Harley's does. But what I can tell you it does interact with is the torque curve. So right off of the bat, you can tell going from the different modes. In standard mode, the bike just, you know, operates nice and polite. It's comfortable around the street. It's not too hoppy. Doesn't feel like it has a whole bunch of power. Touring broadens out the torque curve, gives you a little more power when you're in the upper end of the mid-range. If you want to pass something, you just roll on the throttle. It's quite easy to jump out in the passing lane and pass anything. The biggest difference is when this bike is switched to sport mode, this whole motorcycle comes alive. It's incredible. The amount of torque and quick response. I mean, that 2,900 RPMs for that to be where it achieves the peak torque number, that means, you know, from 2,000 on, it's really building that torque, and that's the fun place for it to ride. You know, what we say all the time, that horsepower is what you brag about, but torque is what you ride. The actual equation that goes along with that is that torque is the rate at which horsepower is achieved. You know, so the faster you're achieving your horsepower, the more torque you have, the more fun the bike is to ride. I've heard some of the journalists out there with a racing background that have done reviews on this bike, and from a racer's perspective, that 29.5 degree lean angle is not a lot. They also feel that the 665 pound as ridden weight of this motorcycle still makes it a big bike. For a lot of us in the Harley world, 665 pounds is a light motorcycle. 29.5 lean angle, I think there's plenty of there. It's a really, really fun motorcycle to ride. So before we talk about any more of it, let's take you out. I'm gonna take you guys through a day here in the hills of Western Pennsylvania, where we did some test riding on the 23 Sport Chief.
All right, so this is Chris with Cycle Source Magazine's Greasing Gears TV, and this is the first ride on the Indian Sport Chief. We're going to be using the Cena 30K today to record this test ride. Hopefully it's going to go well. So, I have to say, as we're pulling out with this thing, I mistook this motorcycle when they first drop it off as another one of their Scouts. It's so small, it comes in at 665 pounds in running order, really low seat height. It just looks like a Scout at first glance. I was busy that day, really hadn't paid attention. And the bike was in sport mode the first time I took it for a ride. And that's when I realized that 116-inch motor with 122 foot-pounds of torque, that this was in fact not a little bike. So we're going to start out with this thing in standard mode and get a feel for it a little bit. It's a nice fall day here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're just going to get out and do some of my favorite backcountry roads. Then we'll do some highway. We'll go through the different modes for riding. But right off the bat, I can tell you that you can feel the bike is very well balanced. Like there's no weight shift when you're going through the fence. It's pretty nimble. Nice suspension. Maybe even too much braking. Gotta wait to get out in some of this traffic. Country traffic, everybody's coming home from work. So Indian motorcycles, obviously this go around, fueled by the engineering prowess of the Polaris company. Polaris is very well known for all their snow machines, ATVs, four-wheelers. They bring a different twist to this, you know, in the American V-twin segment. We've had a standard approach from Harley-Davidson Motor Company for so long that, you know, some things are just given. It's chain drive primary versus gear-driven primary. The approach these guys have to their controls and ergonomics, you know, just a little bit different than you used to with Harley-Davidson. Some of it's in a nice way. You know, I can say right off the bat about the gear-driven primary, it sounds different, you know, not necessarily a rolling down the road sound, sort of on gear shift and, you know, decel and stuff like that. You can hear a little bit of the difference. I can't really tell. I'm actually going to move this up to the sport mode. Okay, so we're going to get into some twisties here with this bike set in the sport mode now. Okay, that was the first peg drag. That's pretty good. Holy shit. Hey, so these are backcountry roads. You can see the speed limits 35 and 40 miles an hour. I'm doing 85 and 90. And then stuck to the road. Really, really nice. Really good handling. That was sport mode. Let's see. We're going to move it to tour and take this thing up on the highway, see what differences we feel there. I definitely noticed a difference in the delivery of the power across the range in the torque mode. Snappier off the line. Now in touring, I can feel that it's definitely smoothed out in the low end. It's not snappy. Still plenty of power there, but it's definitely broadened out the torque curve. Like you can feel it. The torque curve is much wider. It's a smoother delivery of the power. It's climbing throughout the range. Pretty neat. Totally comfortable on the highway, 80 miles an hour. You know, I'm not feeling any strain. The rider position on the bike is fantastic. In spite of the fact that I'm hanging out here, you know, virtually no wind chill, it's got a little wee chin bearing, but I don't feel any undue wind pressure or exposure. So it's got some good aerodynamics, I suppose. Look at that. That's that passing power. Didn't even downshift for that. Just hit the throttle right around the car. So we're back in standard mode. I just want to see the difference coming through some of these country roads on standard. Oh, big difference, but it's not for a lack of power, that's for sure. It's just how quick, this compared to the sport mode, it's about how quick you can get on top of the rev. Oh, goodness. Definitely way more front brake than there is rear. Well, you're almost better off if you use the old motor truck. One or two fingers up over the front brake lever and just feather that thing real nice. That gives you plenty of brake. Here we go. This is one of my top 10 favorite roads around my house. It's affectionately called the roller coaster road. Oh yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the rest of the roller coaster. So this is a nice little place we go to test ride from time to time, Deer Lake Park. If I can make it through here without seeing cops, it'll be great. Take money, no whammy, stop. I can't believe when you switch this motorcycle into sport mode, man, you better be ready to get down. I cannot believe how much different. It's like a completely different bike. Now, Indian tells you in the spec for this that the 122 foot-pounds of torque that this bike achieves is at its peak at 2,900 RPM. Now that, for anybody who hasn't done a lot of the conversion to that, notice where you're at when you're riding. I mean, right between 22 and 25 is really where that's the sweet spot of getting ready to grab that throttle. So that gives this bike muscle car type performance. Like the reactions, it's incredible.
Okay, so let me bust in the middle here and tell you a couple of the things that I found, because you can tell from the video that there were some spots where I was riding this motorcycle quite aggressively. One of the things, believe it or not, the dual Brembos up front, I almost feel like it's almost too much brake for the motorcycle at this weight, or something. I don't know. I found myself wanting to ride, you know, the old motocross style with just two fingers on the front brake, feathering it, because if I really grabbed a handful of it, I felt like the front end dove a little bit. So maybe that's something we could address in suspension, but, you know, a little bit of adjustment didn't take very much, and I was used to that. Back suspension is fine. I never felt any wobble. I never felt like it got head shake at all. There were a couple times that I drug the pegs. Once I figured out where that angle was, I kind of stayed off of it, but I could see somebody who would expect the kind of performance that comes out of a motorcycle that's set up more for a racing environment. This is still set up for the cruiser, the new emerging performance market that's coming out of the American cruiser market today. Because of that, it doesn't have super high mid controls like you would find on some of the European and Asian bikes. They're still mid controls that are kind of forward, they're kind of low. Overall, I found the rider position to be very comfortable. You know, a nice tuck-in seat, almost like a Saddleman. The bars were in a good place. You know, I don't know how it would be for, you know, actually trying to take this motorcycle out and tour with it. But then again, it's really not set up for that anyway. In an entire day of riding this motorcycle, I never felt any kind of fatigue from riding it. Overall, great motorcycle. $19,000 is around the ticket price on this bike. And I think that, you know, with everything that's going on, Harley-Davidson coming out with their softail models that are going after that performance market. You know, some of the European companies are trying to come in and figure out where that, you know, midweight motorcycle market, how they can get into it. I think Indian has a very, very strong contender here. And this is something to be considered because, you know, Indian, I've sort of gone back and forth on like where they were going with the whole company. This is a product I can firmly appreciate as their very own entry into the American performance market. So we have a bunch of videos coming out on this thing as we get into it further. This is simply just the first ride. And from here, we're actually going to get with Indian Motorcycle Company and start asking them some questions about the motorcycle, some specifics about the technology that's involved, and we'll bring all that to you. Until next time, get out and ride your motorcycle or get in the garage and do something to it. This is Chris with Grease and Gears TV.